Hello viewers, welcome to MOOC's online course on visual perception and art, a survey across the cultures. This is lecture number 5 and the topic of this lecture is visual perception and creativity part 2. I told you in the previous lecture that today we will be looking at what a very well known artist from Netherlands called M.C. Escher had explored, addressing this singular concern about visual perception. And more specifically, he was interested in the optical illusions that a visual perception is generally involved with. Because when Escher was doing all his very interesting and fascinating drawings, the idea that visual perception is not merely a passive biological phenomenon, the idea that visual perception is rather a very complex phenomenon involving almost unexplainable visual illusions, optical tricks and various kinds of ambiguities and ambivalences. This idea was already established, or at least this idea was already being studied. So, in that sense, Escher was very much a part of his time, but at the same time, because of his singular concern with the illusions of visual perception, the history of art took a long time in recognizing Escher as an artist, quote unquote. Mostly he was considered, or he was assessed as an artist with fascinating but a limited kind of concern. Nevertheless, when you look at his works, you know the world that he is drawing us into, a world that we cannot really ignore, not just because he makes the world very fascinating in his drawings, but also because at the end of the day he is able to connect his pictorial world with the real world outside in certain philosophical ways. We will come back to that later on. Now, before we begin to look at the specific examples of Escher's works, let us once again quickly look at some of the kind of examples which can be associated with the concerns that reflect in Escher's works. And I am talking about optical illusions in particular. I am talking about those pictures which actually play a trick on our eyes and which have been variously experimented by many. For example, when you look at this drawing, if you look at the right side of this drawing, you will have this visual knowledge that you are looking at 3 rectangular pieces, but the moment you look at the left hand side of this drawing, you see not 3 but 5. So, which one is true, 3 or 5? It entirely depends on the angle from which you are looking at this object. So, visual illusion or optical illusion has definitely got something to do with the way a particular diagram or drawing is constructed, but it has also got something to do with our chosen angle or chosen perspective, or what we choose to see and what we choose to ignore, right. Now, look at this one again. Looking at these drawings or diagrams from different angles will result in different kind of experiences. they will give you absolutely different visual data. Look at the left hand side diagram. When you look at the diagram from the left corner, you see 3 circular rods, tips, the end tips of 3 circular rods. Look at the same object from the upper right corner, you see one single rectangular end, no circular tips at all in the same drawing. Now again, how it is possible? Of course, there is a trick in the drawing, but again there is a kind of trick or ambiguity that is going on in our brain when we are looking at, and this is precisely what visual perception to a great extent is all about. So diagrams like this have always remained a visual riddle for us, and the paradoxes in these diagrams are also evident. So for example, impossible staircases. It is an idea that will be explored by Escher, MC Escher, in his drawings quite a few times. So this is just a kind of 3D model of his idea, where you can see this kind of staircase is actually impossible. You can't have that you are going down, but actually you are climbing up. You are climbing up, but actually you are going down. It has to be either this or that. But this impossibility has been drawn in a very convincing way in this diagram. So there is this possibility of using visual perception in a way that we tend to see things which are not shown. We tend to interpret a certain diagram in a way that is actually absurd and impossible in daily life or in real life. Or for example, this one. There are 3 dogs and of course 3 tails, no problem in that. But when you look at the 3 tails of these 3 dogs, they are located in a way that does not match with the location or position of their heads. So how do you go about it? So the bodies and the tails of the dogs never meet in the drawing, but our brain keeps correcting the real mistake continuously and make us see something very convincing. So there is a trick that is happening in the drawing itself, and I ask you to figure out the trick, how exactly it is being drawn and why it is creating that kind of effect on our eyes, or for that matter this one. What is the perspective? What is the position of these objects? Look at these objects very carefully and try to figure out. Interestingly, you will never be able to settle on one particular conclusion. You will never be able to say that okay, this is the drawing of this object from this particular perspective, because immediately, not that I will be showing you, you will be able to see the same object from another perspective very next moment. In other words, the visual complexities these drawings are trying to demonstrate suggest that apart from illusions and visual tricks and visual riddles, visual perception is also involved with a lot of ambiguities, that is multiple possibilities in the same time. So when we say that one important aspect of visual perception is interpretation, now let us make it very clear that it does not really suggest that that interpretation has to be one single interpretation. This is particularly true in case of fine arts. When you look at paintings, artworks, sculptures of any kind, you know that despite the fact that the main subject matter still may remain same, you can have different interpretations. So this multiple possibilities is actually a result or an extension of the ambiguity, visual ambiguity that a visual perception is always involved with. So try to figure out why a static drawing like this seems to be always moving, though there is no movement physically as such. It is a result of a certain kind of visual perception. So, M.C. Escher, here he is, a very intelligent and a superb kind of person with an ability, with a superb ability to expand these ideas of visual perception and actually demonstrate them in his drawings. He lived from 1898 to 1972 in Netherlands. He is a Dutch painter, and when you look at this kind of works drawn by him, it immediately gives you an idea that not that you are looking at something that is an illusory kind of drawing. It does not really create an optical illusion, but it creates a conceptual illusion that the hand that is being drawn on the paper becomes a kind of alive and draws the hand itself. So, something about the circularity of life, something about the circular motion of life is being suggested, but optically and in terms of a drawing language, no doubt that it is a very difficult project, it is a very difficult attempt in which he succeeded in a very, very meaningful way. M.C. Escher, in drawings like this, also succeeds in changing the identity of the objects simply by changing the shapes of the objects. As a result, what you identify as a flying bird at the top of the picture becomes actually a swimming fish at the bottom of the picture. And he transforms the identity of the object simply by playing with the shapes, by playing with the black and white shapes, by playing with the contours, in other words by playing with many visual principles of visual perception and illusion. Similar kind of idea has also been explored in this drawing, where the black tiger and the white tiger, or this whole group of black tigers and this whole group of white tigers, exchange their identities by simply exchanging the black or the whiteness of their shapes. Easier said than done, because when you set out doing something like this, you will realize that how difficult it is to actually demonstrate the transformation so effectively in visual terms. Another example, almost exploring a similar idea. In order to understand what exactly is going on in Escher's drawings, you cannot rush. You have to look at each and every drawing by paying a lot of attention to them, and visually you should be able to figure out and also isolate one figure from the other. In other words, to unlock the visual illusions that is happening in your mind and figure out the details and the process of transformation that is taking place or unfolding in these drawings. So, more or less following the same pattern and a similar idea, Escher has made a number of such drawings where simply by juxtaposing shapes, simply by juxtaposing black and white, simply by juxtaposing different movements and positions of certain animals or figures, he actually transforms the identity of the objects or figures themselves. So, what looks like a bird in the beginning becomes a fish at the end, and this transformation happens right in front of your eyes. He actually, the genius, why M.C. Escher is considered to be one of the most talented artists in this field is simply because he had this impeccable talent or skill of demonstrating this transformation right in front of you. So, he is not hiding his tools, he is kind of laying them open in front of your eyes in order to figure out how exactly he is doing it. Another simple example of that kind is again where the birds not only changing their shapes, but is changing their identity, changing their color, black and white. And it is the process that he is focusing on, and this is what he wants us to enjoy. Really speaking, when you go through Escher's works, you naturally feel that Escher does not really want us only to enjoy the conclusive moment of his art, but he wants us to enjoy the process that is being demonstrated in his art. Now, apart from the transformation from one particular shape to another, or from one particular identity to another, Escher had also made some fantastic and fascinating drawings of how perspectives, distance and angles keep kind of playing certain very sharp tricks on our eyes, like this one. Here, when you are almost convinced that you are tracing the flow of water from a higher level to the lower level, very next moment you are made to feel that actually you are moving from the lower level to upper level. So, the order of or the progression of level is kind of gets upset, and it creates ambiguity, and you are never sure about the perspective or direction or the layers and levels in which this entire thing has been registered. It is the same drawing now that you are looking at, but from a distance. So, from distance what looks like a pretty comfortable picture with a very accurate kind of perspective and all is again an illusion, because when you look at it up close, then you notice that something has gone terribly wrong here. Everything is not okay, and this is what M.C. Escher deliberately does. He does not keep everything okay, he does not keep everything very comfortable. So, not only with shapes and identities, Escher explores the possibilities of creating ambiguity through space and perspective, mainly addressing distance and depth and optical perspective from different angles, like this one. In this work too, the reflection itself may become an illusion of the real by making the real an illusion. In other words, by using these very strange principles of optical illusion which any visual perception involves, M.C. Escher is trying to say that what looks like an illusion could be a reality, and what looks like real could be an illusion. So, he is making a very profound statement on the way we understand or discriminate between reality and illusion. He in fact tries to confuse us with these two concepts. He in fact tries to make us believe that it is possible at certain moments that illusion and reality, they exchange their places and may again come back. So, it is this ambiguity that Escher keeps on playing with, like this one again. Now, M.C. Escher, really speaking, picked up this as his lifelong subject. and in a way it was this dramatized artificiality of the created image. On his 1945 picture Balcony, we have seen a few examples, you will see one more later, with its weird bulging central distortion, Escher commented, surely it is a bit absurd to draw a few lines and then claim this is a house. The theme of Balcony, he said, was this odd situation. Let us go back to this painting once again. This is the one that he was referring to. So, according to him, balcony is not a very simple subject. It is a very complicated subject because Escher believes in the fact that representation itself is very complicated, and representation eschews any kind of simplicity, because simplicity fails to represent the idea properly. And that is why when you look at his drawings which address this impossibility of certain perspectives, or let us put it this way, the artificiality of the laws of perspective, he makes it again very clear that okay, we may have this tool, it is fine that we have a tool called perspective, applying which we are able to create certain illusions, but it is by itself, it is not the end. It may lead us to certain very complex and tricky results if we challenge the laws itself, the laws of perspective precisely. So, this is what happens when Escher challenges the laws of perspective themselves. And going through this kind of practice, needless to say, Escher acquired some incredible skill of depicting certain kind of distortions or distorted perspectives, spherical perspectives, things like that, in very simple tool like a pencil, in pencil drawing like this one. Or look at this one again. What looks like a very simple, well established perspective drawing of a building is not actually so. Look at the building properly and then you will find out something strange is happening over here. Something is terribly wrong. That is precisely the perspective is terribly wrong. In real life, an architecture may not, cannot have a perspective which never takes us anywhere. It is like a kind of a fate that you are bound to keep moving round and round in the same path. So, the mathematical trickery in ascending and descending staircase is not the subject of this, the images of this kind drawn by Escher, because Escher was really speaking never a surrealist painter. He was not really addressing the absurdity of life, he was actually addressing the absurdity of certain visual tools and perception. So, in this picture it becomes clear that he was a kind of existentialist. I am referring to the drawing we saw just now, this one. He had long admired Dostoevsky and Camus, and in a letter to a friend while he was working on Ascending and Descending, Escher explained, quote, "That staircase is a rather sad, pessimistic subject, as well as being very profound and absurd." With similar questions on his lips, our own Albert Camus has just smashed into a tree in his friend's car and killed himself, an absurd death which had rather an effect on me. So, it is interesting to see how Escher is able to see certain predicaments of life in this absurdity of visual perception. So, he says that yes, we do climb up and up, and we imagine that we are ascending. Every step is about 10 inches high. It is terribly tiring because it does not take us anywhere. Where does it all get us? That is what he asks himself, and the answer is nowhere. Now, this is just a hint to say that Escher's drawings, though on the face value are about optical illusions, are about certain problematics connected to visual perception, also have some very serious and profound visual philosophy or philosophy of life or philosophy of death. That is why when you look at Escher's drawings, after having figured out the process of ambiguity and illusions he is creating in his drawings, you can feel that he is just not a skilled draftsman, but he is a great philosopher who was able to comment on the problems of visual representation, on the problems of visual perception, on the problems of visual illusion, almost like a great philosopher. Thank you.